Over the weekend, we took our first look at Borderlands 3, and unlike our typical video, we left everyone on a bit of a cliffhanger, having not yet checked out the game running on base consoles. But this week we are indeed back, and once again, Tom Morgan is taking the helm on this. He's our man in the sky, taking a look at the wreckage from above to see just how everything is shaped up. How is Borderlands 3 on the base consoles, Tom? And welcome once again.
Oh, thank you, John. Yeah, I'm ready for part 2. After the Pro and X analysis, we left on a sour note, didn't we? Because of the performance issues at 60, and we definitely wanted more from the game. And today, I think overall, on balance, there's more of a positive story and more of a positive takeaway here. Certainly looking at the way it performs in terms of the 30 FPS target that they're going for, but we'll get to that later. But yeah, for now, let's take a look at the base PS4 and Xbox One.
Alright, so, there's been a lot of talk about these consoles lately, from our side anyway, as, more people probably still own base PS4s and base Xbox Ones over the Pro consoles, so it's kind of important to get these versions right. I suspect this is where most people are going to be playing Borderlands 3, in fact. So, what can you expect first from the resolution side of things? To reiterate, it was like 1800p in resolution mode on the Pro consoles, and then it dropped all the way down to 1080p if you ran in the 60 FPS mode, and I say 60 FPS in quotes. So what do we got on the base?
So it is pretty straightforward. PS4 runs at a native 1920 by 1080, and the base Xbox One takes the natural step down that we've always seen to 1600 by 900 natively. I haven't seen any dynamic res shenanigans on either side. I tested frames where I would have thought there'd be some sort of performance dip of any kind, and it is 900p on base Xbox One and native 1080p on PS4.
That's not a bad split. I mean, we've seen plenty of Unreal Engine 4 games this generation where the PS4 would be more in the 900p range and Xbox One would be down at 720. So in that sense, the turnout isn't bad. What about the rest of the visuals then, like the foliage and the different LOD pop-in and texture filtering and the like? How do they compare?
I really went into this expecting potentially a massive gap in quality, but actually what we're getting here is, you get the same textures, which was my first thing to look at. Looking close, I thought for one moment, oh, these must be lower resolution. These look very pixelated. But then I turned to the PS4 Pro version and compared them side by side and realized, oh no, that's exactly what the PS4 Pro actually has as well.
A bit strange too, because some textures look pretty darn sharp from the normal viewing distance, but It seems like if you press your face up, or not even that far, but just like when you're getting close to objects during the combat, there's plenty of low resolution assets popping up throughout.
Speaking on the textures, it's usually just the floor mapping that's quite low resolution. The rest of it, the characters are sharply outlined, so that's not a huge issue. That's just part of the cartoon aesthetic. But I think they stretched themselves a bit thin when it came to allocating memory for the textures themselves on the floor. But yeah, in terms of the pop-in stuff, I did a comparison between PS4 and Pro just to get kind of my bearings on what is and isn't in there. So we're going with the res mode on the PS4 Pro side to get us to 1800p, and obviously it looks sharper, less shimmer generally compared to the 1080p on PS4. So image quality is so much better generally on the enhanced console, but base PS4 takes a few steps back in other ways. So pop in a bit more aggressive. LODs are reined in a touch, so if we walk down to this sort of encampment area, we can see like rocks and bits of the geometry popping in just a couple of seconds later, kind of to the point where it's not just margin of error, it's actual genuine difference in the threshold for rendering these parts of the scene. So that's worse. I've also noticed texture streaming is an issue. I think there were problems on Pro.
It's always highly variable, I feel, with texture streaming though. Sometimes even the condition of the hard drive in the system or how full it is can sort of influence the severity of texture pop-in.
Yeah, likewise there's a variance in the way shadows pop in as well. The cascade itself, the line where the quality of shadows is filtered between the near range and the far range, that's the same on Pro and base PS4. And the shadows themselves, if you look down, it's same quality, surprisingly. So really is just pop-in on geometry that's kind of affected, as far as I can see anyway.
Okay, well that's interesting then. So what about Xbox One versus base PS4 then? Do they have a similar makeup as well, or is it just resolution that varies?
So it's kind of as we predicted. So back in our Pro versus X comparison, we noticed X had a few low quality settings as far as anisotropic filtering and the foliage density. So this test between base PS4 and Xbox One kind of proves exactly that, because base PS4, it turns out, has high quality anisotropic filtering, and you can see more sort of tufts of grass in the distance, which again proves that the PlayStation consoles are on par when it comes to those settings, but Xbox One X just inherited what the base Xbox One had, which was lower overall. And therefore, base PS4 has technically higher settings than Xbox One X in terms of texture filtering and foliage density.
Wow, that's actually kind of surprising. It paints an interesting picture, and it almost makes it seem like the Xbox One X version specifically didn't have as much attention poured into it as I would have expected. Beyond those settings, though, one of the things that kind of stood out from what I've seen of the game is the way the menu system works. I mean, this is a loot-driven game, so you do spend a lot of time going in and out of menus, and I'm kind of surprised at how it runs.
Frankly, the amount of lag you get when switching between like the skills section and the weapons section is just too high to be convenient or satisfying to use in any way. It is a matter of sometimes I'm swapping weapons across from my inventory to my character, and I'll press X and like nothing will happen for a second. That sort of thing. Those sort of frustrations where it's just a bit too laggy to be palatable to use.
At the same time, I suppose it's better than what we had to deal with Anthem earlier this year, where just changing and checking out new gear required you to go back into the sort of the hub area. So you were looking at like 5 minutes of loading just to test a new version of gear. So, you know, it's the leggy menus are not great, but...
No, it's just the fact that we've got to manage a lot of stuff in this game, and resorting to those menus is kind of a crucial part of the game, the whole flow of it. It does bear mention, I think it is a little bit worse on base consoles, but that might be my imagination on this one. It's definitely not good enough.
In a way, then, so far, this has been kind of like old school DF. It's just sort of like, if you want the nitty gritty, that seems to be all that's changed, is like some settings adjustments, essentially, which kind of makes a lot of sense. But I guess the performance is what is most interesting to me, as the two enhanced consoles sort of really struggled in this area. Whereas looking at your footage here, what we're seeing here on the base consoles is kind of surprising, I must admit. So like the base PS4, for instance, it seems to run very, very smoothly at a very stable frame rate, in fact.
Yeah, and it makes me think that these two consoles were the primary target for Gearbox when they set out to make Borderlands 3, and they kind of just went into the enhanced consoles, threw in those two modes. And especially like, you know, with PS4 Pro, it doesn't really nail the performance target in either mode. You know, the 30 FPS cap in the resolution mode just doesn't hit 30 FPS during battle very often. So, but here, 30 FPS is all you get. There's only one way to play the game. There's no toggle to change, and it feels much better optimized for that. So it's just a straight line all the way through, fully V-synced, and within the first few hours, it was really difficult to make it drop at all. You know, at least in these early stages, you're only getting maybe the one off-frame drop or hiccup. But overall, you know, PS4 here just absolutely flies through.
And yeah, and honestly, Xbox One S actually performs better than expected as well. I mean, I have to admit, this is one of those situations where we've seen a lot of games releasing where the Xbox One S or base version was not up to par, but here, kind of like base PS4, the performance is actually pretty darn steady.
Yeah, as always, you go into this thinking, well, this is the outlier in terms of the GPU power it's got to work with, but actually, again, it does feel like they've optimized for this one from the very start, and then sort of extended the range of what it's doing for the X model.
The whole situation then is a little less dire than I first imagined in terms of frame rate, I guess. In other areas, there's some issues, but it seems to me that the problem with the Pro consoles is just straight up down to poorly optimized settings choices for those systems, as in, if we're getting stable performance at 30 frames per second on these consoles, then it should be a matter of essentially picking the right combination of resolution and detail settings on the Pro consoles for their 30 FPS mode, and then they should both be able to achieve a stable 30 FPS lock, just like these, but at a higher resolution. Whereas now, I do think that maybe the 60 FPS mode is probably going to remain a little bit off the table, although it does seem that some people are suggesting that changing certain settings, playing around with different options in the menu, can have weird impacts on performance as well, that maybe improve it in some ways, decrease it in others. So there's still a lot of unknowns there, but it does at least give me hope that there's potential that if you're on a PS4 Pro or an Xbox One X, that performance can be improved with a patch. Because honestly, when you look at these base consoles here, you think, okay, I mean, they both run better than what Borderlands 1 and 2 delivered last generation, and that's where these games got popular. The experience is quite acceptable here. If they can just fix those Pro consoles, they'll be in okay shape.
Yeah, mainly the PS4 Pro, because, you know, they need to nail that 30 FPS cap.
Yeah, that's kind of the main thing, right? You're right. Base console's not bad. PS4 Pro still needs a lot of work. The X isn't too bad if you play in the
resolution mode,
I suppose. I mean, you know, it's always a tough one, because if you don't mind a lot of frame rate dips, it still probably plays better in the high frame rate mode. But either way, the situation is a little bit better overall than I had expected, but it's still not where it should be based on that. But I think that's going to do it for now. You know, thanks for helping out and getting all these tests done on this one, Tom.
Absolutely no problem.
So I hope you've had some fun with Borderlands 3 at least.
It's been a lot of Borderlands, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a lot.
More to come, I think, as well. We've got our PC coverage coming up, so
yes, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So if you guys enjoyed this video, as always, be sure to like and subscribe, ring the notification bell to get some sort of in-game loot, or not, and then of course follow us over on Twitter. And until next time, this is Tom and John signing off.